It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. What a fun day today was in GOP fantasy land. Wow, there was the march for the taste of freedom. That's right. Lauren Boebert, the green woman from Georgia, Gates, a whole bunch of GOP faithful angry that the congressional doctor said, hey, in the House, you should wear a mask. You should do that. Since a good number of you are too stupid to get vaccinated, for the good of everybody, we're gonna reimpose a mask mandate. Now the little children, staked out their protest, got their little selfie sticks. They were all marching over to the Senate, where on the Senate side, they don't have to wear masks. Now, as I have understood this, and here's the difference. The Senate, bunch of old white guys, bunch of old guys, the victims of the pandemic generally, the people who are most at risk, the people who have been vaccinated already. In fact, most of them were vaccinated before any of us could get vaccinated. So in looking at this, if you were a sane, rational person going, this workplace, everybody's vaccinated. They're going to be okay. This workplace, you've got a bunch of dimwits running around wanting to infect everybody else, being children. Maybe we need for their own good, and moreover, the safety of all of the other workers to protect themselves. But, Lauren Boebert marched over with the rest of the Klan to get into the Senate area and proceed to do their photo op of, see, look, we're in the Capitol. We're not wearing a mask. Nah, 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 nah. I mean, that's really what it seemed to me. These grown people doing the childish things where you go, yeah, this is our leadership. Oh, yeah, these are the people who have the free world in their hands. Yeah, I have such faith in these dimwits. In fact, the one guy, I wasn't sure if he was looking at the right side of the camera as he was taking, who knows what he was doing. But it's just sad that the people who are supposed to be our elected leaders, our betters, the smart people that are supposed to lead the country into the future and take care of and solve problems, can't even be respectful to each other. So, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she goes and does this cute little video, which she's got nothing else to do, because the Democrats stupidly threw her out of the committees. At least I think so. She's got nothing to do but make silly little videos. So we're paying her $175,000 a year with healthcare and pension to make TikTok videos. Although, to be honest, she's not worth much more than that. She's going on this, see, there's a magic line. There's a magic line. I have to wear my mask in the house. But when I come over here where the old people are, where the people who are the most vulnerable, I can take my mask off. And she does. And you go, this is exactly what's wrong with our society. This is everything that's wrong with our society right now. Because you've got this dimwit who will not say if she's been vaccinated or not. She keeps falling on my HIPAA rights, my HIPAA rights. I wish someone would give her a swift kick in her HIPAA rights. I'll bet you she's vaccinated. I'm not a big better, but I'd put money on it. Because if she wasn't, she'd be the champion of it. But she marches over into the Senate. Now understand, a lot of the southern states are seeing an increase. Georgia, not as much as Alabama, where she has been. But she marches over there. And we know that the Delta variant is very contagious. We know that it spreads easily. So if, let's say she is vaccinated, let's say it doesn't affect her. She's carrier. She takes it into the Senate. She kills off a couple of senators. Is that a big deal? I guess it depends on which side of the aisle. I guess at this point, that's where we're going. I'm looking at this and I'm going, at what point do we really start holding these people to some bit of account? I mean, it's insane. But they had their little shindig. They took their little pictures. They made their little points. They had their little fit. Still haven't solved any of our problems, but they got to get their panties in a wad and that. Also, you had the 4Gs, Green, Gates, Gohmert, and Gosser. We'll just call them 4G for now. And if it's like 4G, the Verizon I get for 4G, and it doesn't work, kind of like them. Evidently, they showed up in a prison facility where the terrorists / insurrectionists are being held. They demanded to inspect the facilities. This is the height of entitlement. So 4G shows up. Louis Gohmert, the crazy of the, there's part of me as I was watching this interaction, I don't know who's worse. I don't know who's crazier. Gates, who's probably going to jail. Green, who's just flat off her Q rocker and probably going to jail. Gohmert, who's been nuts for years. And Gosser, who you go, yeah, where'd that come from? I don't know which one's crazier. But Gohmert evidently tried to argue with the people at this incarceration facility, this detention center, that he should be allowed in because they didn't let any of them in. And nor should they have. But he tried to make the argument that he's got super secret, top secret clearance, man. He's got clearance. And he should be allowed to come in. He should be allowed to just waltz right into a federal prison and do what he wants. Go where he wants, see what he wants, all of that. Because he's got, after all, super secret, super clearance. And they kicked him out. So then he goes on to say that he believes that his people, the terrorists, his clan, his party, the terrorists, were being treated worse than the bloodthirsty terrorists at Guantanamo Bay. Let that sink in for a second. Here's U.S. Congressman going to go to the bat for someone who was ready to take down our government, and in the most dramatic fashion possible. And then accuse, again, remember, the Republican Party is supposed to be the law and order party. They're the party supposedly of law enforcement, of police, of corrections officers, of prisons. They're supposed to be the law and order party. And they're pointing their finger at the law and order community saying, you're treating our people like they're bloodthirsty terrorists. Like we did in Guantanamo. Didn't work, didn't get him in. But, it's kind of the rhetoric extreme. And again, they're not talking to me because they're never going to get me on their side. They're feeding the rabid, angry base. They're feeding the grievance radio people. They're feeding the Fox News community. They're feeding those people who want to believe that these people who attacked us on January 6th, these people who broke into our Capitol and tried to stop the certification of a presidential election, that somehow now they're either martyrs or heroes. And I'm not sure which day they're martyrs or which day they're heroes. It's kind of like if the moon's up, they're one side. If the moon's down, they're the other side. It's kind of this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of thing where they're switching positions all the time. It's kind of like when you were a kid and you used to play red light, green light, where, one day, get vaccinated, next day, don't. One day, heroes, next day, martyrs. It's crazy, but it's who they are. One day, don't get vaccinated. We don't care about COVID. We don't care if we die. The next day, the vaccine's going to kill you. Don't do it. It's crazy. These are crazy people. And somehow, crazy people have gotten hold of one of the major political parties in this country. And somehow our news media keeps taking them seriously. I mean, at some point, I'm hoping that, we just go, you know what? Don't care. Don't care anymore. Now, interestingly enough, I did see a news report, and I have been wondering, this has been one of those things that's been on my mind for a while now. Whatever happened to crazy Michelle Bachmann? I've been wondering that for a long time because I was a big fan of Michelle. She's crazy as a loon, but I was a big fan. She wasn't. I never saw her as dangerous crazy. I wouldn't have put her in with the 4Gs. I wouldn't have put her in that category. After all, she's got a B as a last name. But I wouldn't have put her in with 4Gs. I thought she was, kooky, out there, I'm going now. Maybe she's right there with the 4G folks. She was interviewed by one of these crazy right-wing pastor church kind of podcasts. And talking about her experience, because she was in the Capitol, she was at the Capitol grounds on January 6th. But her version of it is quite interesting. She just went there to pray. That's all she did. She said, they went, they set up a platform, they had a worship band, they had a number of Christians who came and they prayed and they prayed and they prayed. On the 5th and 6th, she said Washington, D.C. was the happiest place on earth. Happiest place she's ever been. 5th and 6th, happiest place she's ever been. She said, quote, so many people were coming in support of President Trump. So many believers were here. People were witnessing on street corner after street corner. They were witnessing to the gospel of Jesus. And all they really wanted was to uphold the true election, because Jesus wanted the true election. She goes, the day was really, she says, more akin to a family reunion. White supremacists, terrorists, people who came with the intention of stacking up bodies, with the intention of gaining control of the Capitol, of stopping the certification of our election, of hanging Mike Pence. Yeah, a family reunion. Maybe a family reunion of militia kooks and crazy people, but it was happiness, she said. Happiness. People weren't angry. No, she says they weren't swearing according to her. They weren't planning an insurrection. They were so happy. And they were in prayer, believing that the election results would be the true election results and only would be certified based on what truly happened in that election outcome, she says. So people of faith were here by faith, asking God himself for faith in his true election results. I didn't know God had election results, but according to her, she does. She says that's the real story of January 6th. She said they didn't see normal people breaking in to the Capitol. No. And her argument was, it's the others. It's the Biden people who are doing this. It's all those Biden people. And you go, what in the ever-loving bit of insanity are you talking about? If you followed social media in the days up to January 6th, everyone knew what was coming. I woke up that morning going, how much blood will be in the streets? And she's talking about prayer. Evidently, Jesus wanted us to overthrow the Capitol. That's the only thing I can come up with. That's all I can think of. That's all I can come up with is that Jesus wanted a coup. Now, she asked what coup? Didn't happen. But here again, this is one of those moments where, which side of this are you going to be on? You're with the police. You're against the police. It wasn't a coup. It was a normal day. I mean, we're in this weird kind of space where up is down and front is back because the faithful, they truly believe, the true believers, whatever it is, they truly believe Donald Trump won because they believe it. And facts be damned. And whatever lie comes out, they're going to buy into. There's this Dan Barton guy who's I hate to call him a historian because I don't really think of him as a historian. Or David Barton is his name. I don't see him as a historian, but they called him a historian. He's claiming that we're going to see very soon, that one single individual cast several thousand votes in Georgia, and that's how Trump lost. So they're gonna unveil the single person, and we're gonna get to it someday. And I'm guessing that's August when they reinstall Trump in the White House. Because again, the true believers, the Michelle Bachmans of the world, they're still buying this stuff. And more importantly, they're still spending money. They're still sending tons of money to Trump. What was it, $75 million he's raised this year to stop the steal and hasn't spent a dime of it on trying to do any of that? Because he's putting it in his pocket. You got Elise Stefanik on Tuesday starting her, hey, fund me. Never mind what those policemen said. Never mind the horrific stories that they said and the videos that you watch. No. This is Nancy Pelosi's doing, and send me money. Oh, did I mention send me money? Yeah, send me money. And you know what? The faithful are doing it. The people who truly believe that we're holding the martyrs. That it was like just another day on January 6th. Wow. What a crazy time to have one of our political parties lose its mind. But the good thing, taste of freedom. They had their taste of freedom. They marched over to the Senate where they could then breathe on the Senate staff and who knows? If they have the virus, if they don't, they could show that children can do something too. I hope people in their districts look at this and go, how about doing some work? How about instead of just marching around taking pictures of yourselves, throwing a temper tantrum, how about doing some freaking work? At some point, if that's all you were doing in your job, wouldn't you get fired? It's time to throw these bums out. That's why I say use the power of term limits. Vote them out. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Pete Dominic's going to be here to share some thoughts on the March for Freedom and all the other insanity that we've seen. Quick break. Right back.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1969. That was the day AFSCME sanitation workers in Charlotte, North Carolina, walked off the job. More than 85% of the sanitation workers were black in this predominantly white southern city. It was their third garbage strike in a year. State statutes prohibited union contracts in municipal agencies, but AFSCME was determined to win union recognition and establish an agreement with the city. Southern Director for AFSCME James Pierce thundered, quote, "We'll bring in whatever help we can get if the city tries to break the strike. We can turn this place into a Memphis or a Charleston in a few days." Of course, Pierce was referring to the two victorious strikes by black workers that had rocked the South within the past year. Black sanitation workers in Memphis walked out in a historic strike in the spring of 1968. Hospital workers in Charleston, South Carolina had just won their strike days earlier. Pierce outlined the issues at stake. According to the Asheville Citizen-Times, the Charlotte City Council had adopted its final budget without providing dues checkoff, without adhering to established grievance procedures or seniority rights, and without adding important safety precautions for garbage collection. At first, Charlotte's mayor asserted claims that the strike was about dues checkoff, but Pierce shot back about broken promises regarding the establishment of safety committees and non-discrimination enforcement. By the end of the month, a tentative agreement agreement was in place. Strikers won all demands except dues checkoff. But as hospital workers soon found out in Charleston, South Carolina, the city council refused to carry out its agreement with the union. Sanitation workers in Charlotte would strike twice, unsuccessfully, over the next year and a half.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I got to tell you, this story made me laugh. I had wondered, I found out where Michelle Bachmann's been. She's still doing crazy stuff. But now you've got this guy, Milo Yiannopoulos. I can never say his name right. He was the guy who, during the Republican convention in 2016, sat down and said, so what are we going to talk about? I go, well, we're going to talk about how much I don't like you and how much the GOP is destroying this country. And he looked at me and goes, well, we're not talking. He got up, he walked away. I'm like, damn it, I should have saved that. Because I didn't even really know who he was at the time. But that was fun. Evidently now he's an ex-gay. He was, at that moment, he was flaming. He was prancing. He was doing all that stuff. And good on him. Do your thing. Now he's ex-gay, according to him, and ready to partner up with a Florida church to do an audiobook of him reading the Bible. He's going to set up a gay conversion program down in Florida at some point. It's being reported, where he's, evidently going to, I guess, burn people like he claims he did to himself to stop being gay, which is just weird. But hey, he needs the attention. Mom must not have breastfed him as a kid. Just a weird thing. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the March for Freedom that happened today in the U.S. Capitol. I've asked our good friend Pete Dominick to come talk with us. Pete's a stand-up comic, also the host of the fabulous Stand Up with Pete Dominick podcast. Pete, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, great to see you. I will always make time for you and for your wife.
Yep, you're a great dude. I appreciate you taking time for us, man. So what do you think of, let's start with Milo. What do you think of Milo now? Milo not gay? Now going to read the Bible, going to conversion church, going a different route.
That story made me sad. That story makes me sad. I am sad by anybody who can't be, as close to their true self as they want to be. And, the idea that you can be an ex-gay, he's so desperate for money and for a grift that he's come up with a life grift, which is to deny who he is, which is a gay person. And now, reading the Bible for money. I mean, how far has this guy fallen? It's just terrible. It's a terrible thing to create the idea that you can be anything, or, in terms of your sexual orientation. Obviously, you can always improve yourself. So I don't want to say that, but I mean, that's not improving yourself. So the idea that you're going to put it out there to somebody who's struggling with their sexuality, thinks they're alone, the only, really struggling, some young person maybe thinking, well, if he can do it, I can do it. Well, he didn't do it. He's not ex-gay. He's still gay. And by the way, I pranced out here. So I just want to say, nothing wrong with prancing. Not that you were saying that, but
you do, brother.
But to be fair, I'm also sexually attracted to three to five specific men, including Tom Brady. But listen, the idea that you're going to create false hope for young people that are struggling with coming out is dangerous. It's cruel. And it's for him selfish because it's not true. We all know that he is bullshitting all of us. So it's just sad if it weren't so awful.
Yeah. And it's, at the end of it, you hit it right at the beginning. It's about money. It's a grift. It's him just trying to rip somebody off. And look, to me, that's the story of the GOP. I mean, I look at Tuesday when you had these horrific stories of these police officers, and you've got Elise Stefanik coming out going, hey, let's have a fundraiser. Send me money.
Yeah, I mean, more importantly, coming out and blaming Nancy Pelosi. They did this with Hillary Clinton as well on Benghazi. They said that she turned down security forces, and that's what they're saying about Nancy Pelosi. She knew there could have been danger, and she turned down extra. Neither of which happened. It didn't happen. First of all, second of all, they're just obfuscating what everybody saw with their own eyeballs. For months that the President of the United States kept repeating a thing over and over that was clearly untrue. and got people to believe it to the point where they then had a date set, organized, and paid for. And then he told them to head up to the Capitol. And then he probably told his Secret Service agents to, if there's any danger at all up there, then the first thing we got to do is whisk old Mike Pence out of there. And, I want you to bring him to a safe bunker in Alaska so that the election couldn't get certified until whatever happened. I don't know I do think that his deepest, darkest fantasy, Donald Trump and maybe Donald Jr. and maybe one other sycophant that works with him really thought that those guys were going to somehow take over the Capitol and hold Nancy Pelosi ransom until they, made him president again, or whatever deep, dark bullshit he made himself believe. I think there's something to that. And it's awful. The whole thing is horrendous that so many people believe Donald Trump, that the election was rigged and stolen from him. It's terrible for our future elections all the way up and down, local and state and federal. And watching these testimonies this week was heartbreaking. And the only thing, not really, but the only thing more heartbreaking was people, criticizing Adam Kinzinger for becoming emotional. It's like men don't cry. I heard a lot of that this week. So, yeah, they do cry. And I was one of those men crying on Monday or whatever day it was, Tuesday, during the hearings. It was awful.
Well, it was awful. But the thing that gets me is you've got an entire political party in this country, sans two people who are bought and sold and on this crazy train that today, a bunch of them got together in the House and they had their March for Freedom or their Taste of Freedom March or whatever the heck that was with their little selfie sticks and their cameras for their photo op to march over to the Senate so they could take off their masks.
Rick, what did they mean when they use the word freedom?
I really have no idea what they mean by freedom, other than hooray for me and the hell with you. I get to do whatever I want without regard for anything having to do with you.
Right. Freedom from cooperation, freedom from collaboration, freedom from my neighbor. And what I hear with freedom is, and I also hear this with national security. Are you strong on national security? Only if you have good healthcare system. Because my threat to me and to my family, the thing that's most likely to put us in danger are health issues, not a terrorist attack. No, health issues. So for me, national security is a strong universal healthcare system. And freedom is freedom to not have to work next to somebody who's going to get me sick by choice. The idea that they defined freedom partly by I think the way that you described it really well, and by several other definitions of, the government confiscating my taxes or freedom to not have to wear a mask. And it's like, no, these are silly definitions of freedom. They are individual freedoms, and we have collective freedoms, and we need to have a more thoughtful conversation. I mean, pathetic the way that they talk about freedom and liberty and all that. It's such a grift. It's so stupid. It's insulting to our intelligence, the way that they throw the word around freedom around, regarding, being able to have whatever gun they want, however many bullets they want, to drive whatever they want, wherever they want, and not have to listen to anybody tell them, quote, what to do. That's really the other issue. Freedom from having anyone telling me what to do. You're not my dad. No, I'm not, but this is my convenience store and you have to wear shoes, fuckface.
Dude. Terrestrial radio. But I'm with you on everything else. Because that is really their idea. And Marjorie Taylor Greene marching from the House side to the Senate side, taking off her mask in the Senate side, is the ultimate childish game, knowing that she could be bringing the virus with her into a chamber of old people who are the ones who are potentially the victims of this.
Well, listen, before Marjorie Taylor Greene was a congresswoman, do you know what her job was?
I actually don't know.
The original Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz. She's made of straw, Rick. She's just a straw man, straw woman. She is just, you mentioned, Buchanan earlier? What's her name? How quickly we forget her.
Michelle Bachmann.
Michelle Bachmann. Remember when she was the craziest person
I loved her. She was as crazy as you could, a little loon. But I never thought she was this kind of danger crazy.
Well, these people are way more crazy than she was. She was really crazy. But Marjorie Taylor Greene and Chip Roy and Gohmert and Lauren Boebert, and there's more. There's several. And then if they're not crazy enough, like this woman who is somewhat moderate, Mace she represents Charleston, South Carolina, and more in South Carolina. She lightly criticized Trump after the insurrection, and there was backlash. And so she went way off the deep end. And so if they're not appropriately conspiratorial, bigoted, and absolutely out of their minds about the most ridiculous stuff, then they're going to lose. They can't win re-election. If you're not crazy enough, they'll primary you with someone crazier. It's like if you say, something crazy like Trump won the election was rigged. And if that's not crazy enough, because some, person that's running against you is like, listen, the moon is made of cheese. And if you don't agree with it, if you don't come all the way over to moon is made of cheese, we're going to primary you, because it's not enough to say that Trump didn't win the election, that climate change isn't real, and that trickle down economics don't work, and that wearing a mask and vaccination, you're getting microchipped. No, the cow jumped over the moon, and if you're not with me on that, then we're going to primary you. It just gets crazier and crazier and crazier, because they're all led by the crazy folks on YouTube and on the internet, on Fox News, on Newsmax. Those guys come up with crazy stories in their writer's room. They pitch them at 7, 8, and 9 o'clock at night. They reverberate all day on all these other shows, and they just get nuttier and nuttier. Alex Jones, crisis actors. It's just never-ending flow of vomit at them that makes them more and more extreme.
No, you're absolutely right. And every one of them, if you saw them on their march for the taste of freedom, all of them had their cameras. They were all doing their live streaming, taking their selfies, all so that they can do a lot of just what you're talking about, so that they can rise up and ultimately make more money. Because ultimately this comes down to money.
Yeah, it comes down to, I mean, some of them, I think a lot of them really are principled. They're principled about crazy things. Crazy things. I mean, so many of today's Republican Congress representatives are 100% educated by their own life experience, and which is fine. Everybody can come with it, but mainly that. So if they experience one thing one time somewhere, they're making policy on that. But more importantly, they're educated by Sean Hannity, and worse, Tucker Carlson, and worse, Alex Jones, and worse, hardcore outspoken white supremacists. Those are the people that raised Madison Cawthorn. Those are the people that educated Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert. They are just spouting Hannity. Yeah. They have no idea about public policy. They have the words public health, a master's in public health, they would never listen to somebody who has that. Never. Yeah, they would only listen to their favorite talker.
Yeah, and I would argue even worse than them, the evangelical community who's Jesus wanted the insurrection.
Or even, I mean, I'll rail harder than that. I've always been, a pretty hardcore atheist person. I mean, I'm agnostic in terms of what I believe, but I definitely, think that if you believe some of the crazy stuff about mainstream Christianity, moderate Christianity, that's pretty crazy to believe that stuff too. So of course you're going to be more likely to believe other things as well. I mean, but I remember when I found out the truth about Santa and the Easter Bunny. I don't know who's listening. I don't want to destroy, innocent children's lives, Rick, but I remember when I learned that, and I remember thinking, oh man, I can't even believe I bought that. That's so, it's like critical thinking. You start to learn, you start to understand how to be a reasonable person, and then you actually get educated on things, and then you start to rely on data and expertise, and it's just not part of the Republican Party or the conservative movement, which is no longer the conservative movement. It is the Trump cult. It is him. And he, by the way, also follows whatever the pundits say. He's not making, throwing these things out. He's not coming up with these ideas. He knows that a lot of his people are anti-vax and white supremacists. Yeah,
so here are we at this moment then? Because if they are the anti-vax people, and I know they are, is this how we get rid of some of them? Let them all get sick, let them die. We could turn Florida, Texas blue. No. Not going there?
No, because the death rate isn't that high. It's just not that high. It's not high. It's not high enough that I think it affects the outcome of a vote in any district at any level, I'm guessing. So that's, something that the most craven among us could wish for. But even then, I think if you look at, I don't think this movement is unfortunately dying, because there's always going to be some young ass jerk, who Charlie Kirk, for example, who's got millions and millions of young people watching him say that Simone Biles is a sociopath. That's what he said, and like whatever, he'll just say whatever he can to get people, and it'll always work. And so I'm not saying that we should give up. I'm not saying that that's necessarily going to dominate, but I'm saying it's not going to die out to the point that it affects the outcome of an election. And COVID is not going to kill enough anti-vaxxers either. It's just it's not that deadly. It's deadly for sure, and it can make you very sick and long-term illnesses. But it's, I don't think that it's that kind of numbers, and generally speaking, still, even though it's affecting younger people now, still generally killing, older voters as well. So I don't know.
Yeah, well, no, we'll see. I mean, but it's raging in the places where where they are.
You feel terrible. I feel worst for. It's very easy for those of us who are liberal snobs, and I'm talking about myself, to just look down on them and say, "Fine, die." But then, if you're going to be so stupid that you're not going to get it. But then I always, as soon as I feel that way, and I do think that to myself sometimes, if I'm being honest, I immediately think about the dedicated people working in the hospitals who thought they had this beaten and thought they weren't going to have to deal with this. And now their hospitals are overrun in places in Florida and Missouri right now, in Arkansas. And I feel terrible for those people, because they're just, frankly, they didn't sign up for that. Yeah. I don't think most healthcare, workers signed up for, walking literally into combat and potentially getting sick and dying just from going to work. And so I feel really terrible for them.
What's amazing to me is, how fast the news cycle changed. Infrastructure on Wednesday, the March for Freedom today. Tuesday seemed like a long time ago. That's what bothers me, because we've already lost the outrage that should have come from Tuesday's testimony.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I haven't yet, I'll say. I mean, that Tuesday's testimony was so powerful and so impactful to anybody who watched it, to most people who watched it. And the credibility that police officers supposedly have, especially on the right, should matter. I do think that'll matter. I think that it matters that there were, let's say, white police officers up there saying, what they said. I think that does matter to enough people. And I think that this is going to go on, and it's frankly entertaining if it wasn't so horrific. And so the point being, keep it going if you're Democrats. Remind them of who they are and what they did, and never let them forget it because of what you said. It's easy to move on, but let's keep having these hearings. And the Republicans certainly did it really well, arguably damaged Hillary Clinton with the whole Benghazi affair, which wasn't even a thing, and this was a thing. This was an attack on the capital of the United States. And by the way, the one thing that's kind of depressing, when I tend to forget this fact, the rest, do you ever do this, Rick? The rest of the world watched that.
Yes.
I always forget that. I always get so insulated, and it's easy to as an American, the world, revolves around it. The rest of the world saw those terrorists attack the Capitol to overturn our election, led by a person who paints his face in a natural color.
I'm still hoping there'll be some perp walks. I'm not overly confident, but I'm hoping it does. But Pete, I appreciate you taking some time, sharing some thoughts. Always great talking with you, my friend.
Pleasure to join you, Rick. Thank you very much for having me. Great work, buddy, as always.
Good stuff, as always. Our good friend Pete Dominick, stand-up comic. Make sure you check out his podcast, Stand Up with Pete Dominick. We'll get links out on how you can do that. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, And this is Labor History in 2.
This day in labor history, the year was 1956. That was the day that an oil tank explosion took the lives of 19 men fighting a fire at the Shamrock Oil and Gas Company in the northeast of Dumas, Texas. Dumas was in the Texas Panhandle, oil boom country. The day after the tragedy, the Chicago Daily Tribune carried the story of what happened. 4 huge petroleum tanks exploded today, bathing 19 men in a super hot wall of flame and killing them in their tracks. The towering orange fireball of the first explosion was sighted in Amarillo, 40 miles away. The events that triggered the explosion started when a flammable gas caught flame and flared into a small ground fire at Shamrock. Employees and volunteer firefighters tried to stop the blaze, but despite their effort, the fire grew. Just before 7 in the morning, a 12,000-barrel tank exploded. This ignited another 20,000-barrel tank, and then 2 more. 15 of those fighting the fire died instantly. 4 others later succumbed to their burns. Many more were injured. A news editor on the scene described what he saw, writing, quote, "A bright orange mushroom boiled up, floating in heavy black smoke, and I prayed those firefighters would get out alive, but some didn't." 8 who died were Shamrock employees. The other 11 were volunteer firefighters. Today, a memorial bearing their names pays tribute to those who died. An inscription reads, quote, "But whether on the plains so high or in the battle's van, the fittest place where man can die is where he dies for man." In 2015, 68 firefighters died while on the job protecting people and property throughout the United States.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Over the years, we've talked about corporate America, basically buying our institutions. And in fact, I'd always said that, the Koch brothers spent millions of dollars buying, economics departments across the country. In fact, one of them, Florida State University, they gave like $2 million to Florida State. And for that little investment, they, for a while, actually had veto power over any economics professor hired in that department. And you go, wow, that's real power for what to them was really pennies. And corporate America has done a pretty good job of, with just some pennies, figuring out how to pervert or soil any institution because, hey, we're all broke. We don't tax them anymore. We beg from them. And this most recent story that I came across over at the Prospect magazine is one of those things that made me go, yeah, this is corporate America again doing what they do well. The story's about the Juul company, the people who made e-cigarettes, basically buying an entire edition of the American Journal of Health Behavior and then just putting all their stuff in it and giving it away. And I'm going, I know why, but why would the American Journal of Health Behavior do that? And here to share some thoughts on, why this happens, how it can happen, and what it means and what we should be doing about it. I've asked David Dayen to come talk with us. David is the executive editor of the American Prospect. Their article is the one on the Juul story. David, thanks for taking time for us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So am I getting this right? This American Journal of Health Behavior paid I think it was like $50,000, $55,000 so that they could just fill an entire edition of this journal with their propaganda?
Yeah. This was kind of buried in the middle of a New York Times story about how Juul is up against a ruling at the FDA to whether or not to allow their e-cigarettes to be sold over the counter anymore because of the deep addiction that it has caused in particularly among adolescents. And there was just this note that said, yeah, Juul paid $51,000 to have the whole May-June issue of this journal, the American Journal of Health Behavior, devoted to 11 studies that were funded by the company. And that's all it wrote. And so I decided to look into it a little more, and it was even worse than the Times discussed. You can just go to that website of the American Journal of Health Behavior and find the entire issue. It's 219 pages. There are 26 named co-authors on the 11 studies. All of them are paid by Juul. They're either full-time employees or they're consultants who work directly with Juul Labs. And all of the studies make the same exact claim that Juul's products help existing smokers quit, and therefore it has a public health benefit, ignoring the other half of this, that Juul's products also addict a whole generation of young people who never smoked in the first place. So this is a pretty standard example of pure academic corruption.
And it's crazy. But as I was reading through this, and I know this stuff happens, but I don't think I've ever seen such a blatant practice. This happening in an entire edition where everything front to back was on that same vein, where there were no other voices, and then arguing that this is kind of a peer-reviewed kind of publication.
Yes, and that was an interesting part of it, that this journal, prides itself on its ethical guidelines. They have a whole listing at the site. But this is one of these particular kinds of academic and scientific journals where the authors have to pay in order to get published. In fact, there's an entire fee schedule at the website that says if you've been accepted to submit an article, you have to pay $900 to put it on. So the $51,000 that Juul paid was really only a little bit more than what the American Journal of Health Behavior reaps every time that it publishes one of its issues. It gets money from the academics, and that can obviously lend itself to the very extreme level of corruption that you see in this Juul case.
It's crazy, but you look at this and you look at these journals and these are supposed to be the place where you have these intellectual debates, and the peer review process is supposed to keep you honest and true. And yet it just looks like propaganda, and for cheap. I mean, I am amazed at how cheap it is to buy someone's soul. I mean, this I don't know how long this publication has been around, but for $51,000 to put it in there, and then I guess $6,500 to allow anyone to read it. So for what, $57,500, you can literally buy this publication's soul for an entire episode.
Yeah, and it's been around for 45 years, and it's not the only kind of academic publication that uses this model. In this case, this was so egregious that this did cause some upheaval at the journal. The editor of the journal had to resign and actually recently sold the journal. 3 other editors stepped down from the organization. And I have learned since this article came out a whole bunch of other very strange aspects of this story that the reviewers who, this is supposed to be peer reviewed, right? So the reviewers were paid to conduct their review in a very short period of time, literally in 1 week, so they could wrap it up before this FDA ruling, so that this academic paper could be sent out to members of the FDA advisory committee, so that they could know that these studies were out there. And the reviewers have not been disclosed, even though academics have asked who were the peer reviewers of these articles. So there's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
And this has been sort of a minor controversy within the academic world. But whether or not this worked is going to be determined by what the FDA decides, right? Because if the FDA says, yes, we saw this information, and based on these studies, we believe that there is a public health benefit to Juul, and we're going to allow you to stay on store shelves. And at that point, Juul really paid next to nothing to save their business.
Yeah. No, and look, I don't want to get into the whole whether Juul is good for you, bad for you, if it helps, because I've got friends who swear by it. Saved my life. I have friends who say, and I've got other people who say, they're hooked on it. And I don't know the difference between e-cigarettes and vaping, and I don't want to get into any of that. But for me,
it's really it's a cost benefit analysis, right? I mean,
Right.
you could say two things could be correct: that Juul is effective in getting longtime smokers to put down combustible cigarettes and pick up a vaping machine. But it might also be true that these things are so addictive and are in fact marketed to an adolescent market that they are too dangerous to be on store shelves for anybody to buy. I mean, the happy medium might be that you make them prescription available.
No, I'm right there with you. But for me, the more important part of this is not so much the product itself, but the fact that this stuff happens, and that the institutions that are supposed to be out there that to protect us from this kind of propaganda have sold their souls. So I got to ask you, how pervasive is this practice in other publications? Because look, I get a number of peer-reviewed journals that I look at, and now I'm wondering how many of them are sold.
I mean, it's funny because even the American Journal of Health Behavior admits in its frequently asked questions page that this pay to publish model has become a real scourge, that it's designed as a for-profit model to generate revenue without regard to science, really. And they admit that that's a problem, but then they justify their own version of this by saying that, hey, we're a little organization. We don't have a big membership base. We're not the American Medical Association or anything like that. And so we have no other choice. If we want to put out a journal, we have to charge the authors. And so it puts you into this box where the only way that you can put out this information for the public is through a model that's easily corruptible.
The other question I had is, and I've never heard of the American Journal of Health Behavior, but I have to say it sounds an awful lot like one of those euphemistically named groups that were created with a specific task in mind. And it sounds like, about 45 years ago, since that's what you said, they've been around, sounds like the tobacco hearings, sounds like something the tobacco industry started themselves to save cigarettes, and now they're using it to save these vaping e-cigarette things.
Well, I don't know that that's the case, but I will say that when you talk about e-cigarettes and you talk about the tobacco industry, increasingly you're talking about the same thing. I mean, Juul is staked with a 35% investment from Altria, who is the maker of Marlboros. So, it's a category unto itself. It's not just there's a tobacco industry and a vaping industry. There's one sort of sin industry, and they're all buying each other's, they're all invested in each other's products.
So let me ask you the other side of this, because, there's got to be a policy part to this. Is this, something that should be somewhat regulated, somewhat brought out? Because, I'm looking at the dishonesty factor here. Is this something that should have to be disclosed? Do you see anything that brings this to light without someone like you having to uncover it?
Well, it's a difficult question. I mean, the sponsorships were disclosed. This was not like a deep investigative study by myself. If you went to every single article, the conflicts were put right in the article. I mean, that's how I know that everybody was a Juul employee or was paid by Juul. There's no violation necessarily of advertising law here, as long as the sponsorship is adequately disclosed. And it's an interesting thing. Like, if the target was the general population and you did this kind of thing, that could be misleading marketing. But if it's a scholarly journal that's designed for experts, there's this sort of understanding within the law that they're sophisticated enough to just get a disclosure and then look through it. And, I talked to a professor from Harvard Law School who said that it's common wisdom that doctors are among the easiest to fool, because they have supreme self-confidence that they would not be scammed because of their intelligence. So it seems like we take out sort of some underpinnings in the law around scholarly journals and around anything where the target is the expert community, when the expert community brings their own biases and their own blind spots to things as much as the general population.
Yeah, I just keep coming back to how cheap it seems to buy the soul of anything. Our Congress people, our education institutions, these journals. It just seems. I mean, 51 grand is pennies when you're talking about a company as large as Juul and the owner of Marlboro.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the key here is the intended audience is clearly the FDA. And now that this has become more known through the media, will the FDA understand the degree to which this research was the product of a pay-to-play relationship? And will that color their decision-making process when they decide whether or not to allow Juul to remain on store shelves? I mean, that's where the rubber hits the road here. And of course, the FDA, we have seen has in recent memory been swayed. The Alzheimer's drug Aduhelm that the FDA recently approved, which many experts say has no basis in as a treatment for Alzheimer's. And it's so expensive and Alzheimer's is so widespread that it could literally bankrupt Medicare. I mean, these are serious decisions that the FDA has to make. And in the case of Juul, it's a decision that could affect millions of young people. And so whether or not they have an understanding of where the information is coming from, who is behind it, who is backing it, and whether it can be accepted as independent research is really crucial.
I now am going to be. I got something that I now got to look out for that I didn't even know was coming. When are we expecting a decision on this? When are these decisions coming down? Do we think?
It looks like the decision will be made sometime before September, probably like early September.
So I would guess that any input period is over at this point, right?
Yeah, it's not quite that kind of thing because it's more of an administrative ruling than a rule making. It's just and basically Juul has written an application to allow as a going concern as a consumer product, and the FDA has to decide on that. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, but again, this is one of those things that corporate America gets away with. And usually we don't find out until after it's over with. But good on you for picking this up and putting it out. Folks, I'll take a look at it over at the American Prospect. The story, Juul taking academic corruption to a new level, written by David Dayen, the executive editor over at the American Prospect. We'll get links out on social media. David, I appreciate the time, the work that you do. I hope you'll come back again real soon.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Good stuff. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2.
On this day in labor history, the year was 1970. That was the day the United Farm Workers, led by Cesar Chavez, signed their first union contract in California. It was a milestone victory for agricultural workers. Farm workers, often Mexican immigrants, had very strenuous working conditions. They worked long hours in the fields for extreme poverty wages. In the event that housing was provided, it was often unsanitary and of very poor quality. Filipino organizers sought to improve working conditions for agricultural workers. After the U.S. colonized the Philippines, many Filipinos were recruited to work on California farms. They began organizing as early as the 1930s, forming the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee. The Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee reached prominence by the 1950s. At the same time, Mexican-American Cesar Chavez, along with Dolores Huerta, founded the National Farm Workers Association to organize the Mexican workers workers who were increasingly dominating the labor force in the fields. The Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee went on strike against the grape growers near Delano, California. Their goal was to get a raise of 20 cents per hour. When the owners refused to negotiate, the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee reached out to Chavez. The two groups merged to create the United Farm Workers. The United Farm Workers Union was able to get the support of many in the public through a boycott of California grapes. While the boycott lasted some 5 years, grape growers received considerably negative press and suffered financially. As a result, on July 29, 1970, growers agreed to a contract with the United Farm Workers, the first such agreement in farm labor history. So the next time you're enjoying those tasty grapes, think about the workers and their brave efforts to unionize farm workers. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Our local newspapers are being merged, purged, shrunk, shut down, and looted by Wall Street profiteers. Yet, there's good news. In the towns those media vultures are torching, a phoenix is rising. Hundreds of determined locals, often led by people of color, are finding new ways to pay for and revive top-quality local journalism. For example, the Ferndale Enterprise moved to an old Victorian home, renting upstairs rooms to vacationers to subsidize the paper. Also, while aloof Wall Street owners have no connection to us or our towns, the scrappy new community papers are stressing their grassroots connection by moving into friendlier, more central, street-level spaces such as public libraries and community centers so that regular people can see them and have direct access to their reporters and editors. Then there's the editor of the Sahan Journal in Minneapolis, who moves his weekly editorial meeting to the offices of various grassroots groups so their members can help shape the paper's coverage. And in Marfa, Texas, the Big Bend Sentinel is literally serving the public, not only with a good weekly, but also with the Sentinel, a combo coffee shop, cozy bar, cafe, event space, and hangout for locals to meet and greet. In ways big and small, dedicated local journalists are experimenting with funding, structure, staffing, etc. to produce the news that democracy requires. Note to Wall Street vultures, these newspaper ventures aren't interested in scaling up to maximize investor profits. As they know, it was corporate cost-cutting, consolidation, and scaling that got us into today's mess of journalistic collapse. And, unlike the Wall Street model, their success is not measured simply by financial return, but also by how they do at keeping citizens informed and engaged. This is Jim Hightower saying, now that's real journalism. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is made possible by you lowdowners who subscribe to our monthly newsletter, The Hightower Lowdown. You know who you are. Thank you.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I still can't get enough of the March for Freedom. The March for the Taste of Freedom today there in the Capitol. And, you know, as I keep watching the video over and over again, and I have no idea why anyone in the Republican Party would follow Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene anywhere. Honestly, I don't get it. Be crazy, you know, do your thing, but they are, well, I think they're both going to lose in the next election. But they're crazy. They're really off the edge. But I guess they're raising a lot of money, so it's like anything. It's the money that talks. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the big Freedom March. I've asked our good friend Sarah Burris to come talk with us, share some of her fabulous work over at Raw Story. If you haven't seen her, rawstory.com, the website. We'll get links out on social media how you can follow Sarah. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
It's about freedom.
It's about freedom. What are you, Canadian now?
I don't know. For some reason, whenever I try and do a Scottish accent, I have to say a boot.
You might as well, because the rest of it was a clown show anyway. So this fits right with what the geniuses there in our House of Representatives pulled off today.
I mean, really, it's kind of this bigger metaphor of the entire Republican Party following the biggest idiots in their party off a cliff. It makes total sense, and it's this massive metaphor. I was thinking though today about how if John Boehner was still there, they'd be gone. He would have found some prostitute to, like, you know, entrap them or something. And he would get rid of them.
But dude, you've got Matt Gaetz, who there are credible reports being reported that he's had sex with a minor in Florida, and yet he's still not just there, but leading the pack of crazy. He's the head of the 4G. Him, Green, Gohmert, and Gossert, evidently they showed up at a detention facility today demanding access. What the freak is that?
I thought that was a brilliant idea. I thought they should have let him in and then not let him out.
And then kept him like Roach Motel. Yeah, I'm with you.
It's like Hotel California. You can come, but you can't leave. And then Gohmert tried to pull this whole, I have some kind of secret clearance or something, so you got to let me in. And it's like, no, you don't. Nobody would ever trust you with any kind of security clearance. The only kind of security clearance you have is that you can go through security.
Your wife doesn't even let you know where the cookie jar is. What are you talking about?
Yeah, for real. Oh.
But this is this weird kind of entitlement that they have, that they think that now that, and I guess this shows that they don't really know their job or what their job is, that they think they can just walk in anywhere and everyone has to bow down.
And what's interesting is this is something that they try and fundraise off of. And I think a lot of crazy supporters of theirs actually go for it, and we'll give them $25.
Yep. No, you're spot on. In fact, I can't tell you how many tweet responses that I saw. People going, "This is illegal. This is against the law. They're breaking the law." I'm going, no, dum-dum. You don't just get to walk into a prison, no matter who you are.
And what's interesting too is I wondered which prison it was, because they said that they were there to see the insurrectionists. There, I think at last count, I heard that there were 66 that were in prison. I don't think that they're all in the same prison.
No.
So I wondered what prison they went to. Was it like the federal prison in Alexandria? Was it like the DC, city jail? Was it, because these are federal crimes. So why would they put them in the DC city? A bunch of people were arrested outside of Washington. So are they being held somewhere else? There's the one guy, the Horns dude, who was sent to Denver for some kind of psych evaluation. We still haven't heard what's the status there. He could have already been abducted by aliens. I don't know.
And that would be a good punishment. But we did hear from Louis Gohmert that the people in there are being treated worse than the bloodthirsty terrorists in Guantanamo Bay.
Which is hilarious, because it's like, well, you guys are the lawmakers. If you don't like the way people are treated in prison, then maybe pass some legislation about that. Like, I feel like we've kind of been talking about criminal, reform and prison reform for a pretty long time, but whatever. I just think it's hilarious.
Well, I mean, there's that old statement. If you want to, what is it? You want to turn a liberal into a conservative, you throw them in jail. You want to turn a conservative into a liberal, you throw them in jail. Yeah, jail's a bad place. Maybe you should have thought of that before you were going on your criming spree.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good indicator of some forethought there.
And the people who are in there, a year ago they'd be telling you, prison's supposed to be hard. They got cable TV, they got swimming pools. It's easy, and now they're whining that people don't like me, and I'm worried. I have to get soap on the rope.
I wonder, honestly. I bet we could probably find Louis Gohmert for sure. We could find some video of him railing about how prison should be a terrible place. I don't know if we could with the other ones because they haven't been in Congress for that long, but I guarantee you somewhere there is a video of Louis Gohmert railing about that. You
absolutely know there is. And it's just crazy because, you listen to the tantrums of these children and it's what they are. What happened to statesmen? What happened to people who go to Congress to do something in the public interest, to do the right thing, to move the country forward, to make this a better place? All we got is a bunch of kids trying to score points on Twitter, leading our country. And it's crazy.
Well, whenever it comes to Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz, They really kind of are just crazy children. They're people whose fathers made a whole lot of money and they basically were able to buy their way into Congress. I don't think that's necessarily the case for Gosar. I don't know how the hell he got elected, but and Gohmert is just redistricting, gerrymandering the hell out of the state of Texas. So, these people this is how we get this stuff. If you guys don't want gerrymandering, then,
Yeah, I get that in the House. I get
really
the
a big part of it.
gerrymandering in the House. I got that. But how do you end up with, Florida? What's with Marco Rubio? How does that guy, represent the state of Florida, especially now that he's attacked the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, for wearing a face shield while in the Philippines? Hey, Dim Dim, that's the law. You have to do that.
That was one of my favorite stories today because it's kind of an indicator of Rubio just randomly sends stuff out into the ether of the world, and he doesn't necessarily think before he tweets. If you're going to sort of assert something big, if you're going to attack the Secretary of Defense from a lowly little, scrawny Marco Rubio down in Florida who's never served a day in his life, you probably should Google it first. It's just me.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was just like, oh, this is all mask theater, except that everybody else, all of the military people that were standing in the line to greet him also had masks and shield on. And then you look at the embassies for the Philippines and the State Department information that's like, it's mandated that you wear a mask and shield. And then there's all these stories about how the Philippines mandated it. And you're like, how did you just not, like, I guess he missed that day in the news.
Freedom.
I mean, that's the thing about the Philippines is that is not a happy place. That's a really kind of hardcore dictatorial. We've talked about how Trump worships Duterte because of his authoritarianism. So, it's kind of one of those things where if the SecDef showed up without a mask and shield on, they probably would have beat him to death.
Yeah, what happened to that time when the Republicans were, when Rubio himself was probably, oh no, they're great, we love them, and now they're making us wear masks? No, they're all cowards for not refusing to wear a mask.
I would love to see Marco Rubio go to the Philippines and tell them how it's done.
I'd pay for the ticket.
Me too.
I would. I'd pay for the first class. I would say I don't usually. I would never spring for a first class ticket for myself, but for Marco to go to the Philippines, I would do that.
I feel like we could fundraise the hell out of that. We could make that happen.
We most certainly should do. Now, interesting, funny. Another one of these funny Republican stories. John Kennedy, the Republican from Louisiana, evidently attacking one of Biden's nominees. I'm looking at this Hampton Dillinger guy, who evidently Kennedy wasn't fond of, who is this an actual question? Do you believe in God, boy? Really? This is your biggest concern?
That happened. It sort of was couched in this conversation about whether or not he's pro-choice or anti-choice, because Kennedy is rabidly anti-choice.
Right.
What's funny about it, though, is this comes after there was just a rage fest from the Republican Party whenever they were trying to get Amy Coney Barrett on the Supreme Court. And you remember there was a lot of weird, sketchy things about like the church that she was involved in, and like it was a little culty, and people were like, oh no, you're just like trashing Catholicism. And it's like, well, she's a little bit, kind of a weird kind of Catholic. And so all these Republicans were like, how dare you question her faith? How dare you ask her about her church? This is all about religious freedom and blah, blah, blah. And then now Kennedy's up there being like, do you believe in God? Like, go away. Just stop. Why are you even there? Nobody wants to hear what you have to say.
It's really just incredible. But more importantly, I finally found out, and this is one of those things. I was a big fan of Michelle Bachmann's. She was, she was crazy hot and crazy, which, a perfect combination. And then she went away. She just decided she's going to leave, and I thought she was going to go back to Minnesota and do her thing. Evidently now she's running some group, but she was interviewed by one of these crazy religious groups about January 6th, and it was her opinion that that January 6th was like a family reunion. Everyone was happy. It was the happiest day of her life. That the 5th and 6th, they were just praying. They had a worship band. It was fabulous. It was great. There was no insurrection. There were just good God-fearing Christians who wanted, because God wanted the vote to be right, and that's why what it was. It wasn't an insurrection. There weren't terrorists. They were good God-fearing people.
There was a magazine, I think it was like Time Magazine or Newsweek or something that she was on the cover of, and this is back way long time ago when she ran for president, like maybe in 2008 or something like that. And I remember that photo just being like Crazy Eyes Bachmann.
Oh yeah.
And that was so weird. And every time I think of her now, that's what I think of, is just like the physical manifestation of Crazy Eyes. And maybe she has the kind of family that wants to just tear stuff down and tear things up and destroy a building. And, I usually, like, our family reunions are really just about food and fun. And there's a big cornhole tournament that people take very seriously in the family. Maybe Michelle Bachmann just has a family that goes to a Walmart and starts looting. I don't know. She seems like the type.
Yeah, I mean, I'd wondered where she went, and now I know where she is. She's out, crazier than ever. But the thing is I always thought she was like a kind of fun crazy, kind of like, not let's. She
was the kind of crazy where everybody knew she was crazy.
Yeah.
The Republican Party actually felt like she was nuts and sort of acknowledged it and didn't really take her seriously. And what's scary now is that they actually do treat the crazy people like they're legitimate. And in what world? Like, Mitch McConnell doesn't think that. How is it that McCarthy is, again,
well,
John
McCarthy's
Boehner
a moron.
would never
Everybody
have
I've
that.
talked to who's served in Congress, my friend Bob Ney, Joe Walsh, the Tea Party guy, Nancy Pelosi, they all agree he's a moron.
Yeah.
That's how it happens. When your leadership is run by morons, when the kid who had the dunce cap on every day is your leader, you have problems.
What my favorite part of this is that he honestly thinks that he is going to be speaker.
No.
And I can't imagine how that's going to happen.
Never.
There's got to be some crazy gerrymandering that would have to happen to make that happen. But I mean, that's reason enough. You would think Republicans and Democrats would agree on that.
No, because
the worst possible person.
McCarthy can't be speaker because Donald Trump's going to be speaker. The Republicans are going to take the House. They're going to take the Senate. They're going to immediately make Donald Trump the Speaker of the House. Then they're going to impeach Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and they're going to reinstall Donald Trump as president. They've already got it. Yeah. It's already gamed out. They've already got it. It's written down. This is their plan for 2022.
Boy, they better hope that actually happens. I don't see any other way that that's going to work. But who am I? What do I know?
Now, the weird thing is Trump's, some are fearing that Trump's prowess, his word, his endorsement is losing a little bit of steam, because you look in Texas, where the GOP candidate, this Susan Wright, lost to, another Republican. But I loved her comment that she knew she was in trouble when people were showing up wearing masks.
Oh, wow. Oh, goodness. I didn't see that quote, but that's a funny one. To be fair, she is a terrible candidate. Everybody on the grounds there was talking about how there was no way that she was ever going to win. Donald Trump, when he went in there, all he did was endorse her. He didn't drop any money. He didn't do anything for her. But now that she has lost and sort of tarnished his name, now in the Ohio 15th, that special election, the primary is about to happen Tuesday. And the final election, the general election there, is the November 2nd. So now Trump is like, oh, crap. Because there are all these stories about how people are thinking, oh, maybe Trump isn't that powerful anymore. Maybe people don't honestly believe that much in him. And it's like, did you not see the last election? Were you not there? And so I think this is one of those things where he's trying really, really hard to remain relevant, and he dumped something like $350,000 into an independent expenditure for the primary. He's done a robocall. He did that rally in Columbus where he invited the guy up on stage. And what's funny is this isn't like some, like police officer, firefighter, or, virtue signaling, whatever, Republican. This guy's a lobbyist. It's like, really? That's who you're putting your money behind, is the lobbyist?
Yep.
Okay. That's like the worst thing that you could ever call somebody in politics. But I mean, that's kind of how Trump was for most of his presidency. There was a really big revolving door from Trump bringing people into the White House and people leaving the White House to try and make money on J Street.
What's interesting is, he's in Texas, at least, he's trying to blame the Club for Growth. He didn't really want to endorse. He just took their word for it. He didn't do his research so much. It's the Club for Growth's fault that she lost.
Oh, I'm sure. Whatever. That makes no sense. What is surprising to me is that the Club for Growth would even play in that primary. That seems like a seat that's probably going to go Republican. And to be fair, the guy who ran against Wright is not that much far off from her. He's pretty crazy too. But it's somebody who's actually served in government and knows how to sell government. So maybe that's what it is.
So I understand the former guy has a helicopter for sale. Another one?
Yes.
We liquidating?
I wondered that. So the day after the election in November, he put up his 1997 fancy luxury helicopter with 6 seats and soundproof system and all this crap. He put it up for sale and I swear to you, it said on the ad, best offer. It's like, are you really that desperate? And what's funny is this time it's a 1990 copter, so this thing is like 30 years old. It's almost as old as me, and he's trying to sell it for $1 million. I think probably like that's what folks say that it's worth. But again, best offer. And so you kind of have to wonder, like, is he hurting for money? Is that what this is about?
I can't imagine that he is, because didn't he raise $75,000 from the minions to stop the steal and hasn't spent a buck?
Yeah, a whole, not $75,000, $75 million.
That's right, $75 million. Duh.
And it was all on this idea of stop the steal, and he hasn't had a single election lawsuit ever since then. I don't know the degree to which he can use that money for legal services. I think that there are some rules about that. But I would not be surprised if he was paying himself a very large salary, paying his kids a very large salary, doing some reimbursements to Trump org. The thing about a PAC is that a lot of that stuff has to be reported to the SEC. So I hope that they understand that. But yeah, so I think he's liquidating. I think he's trying to sell some stuff off. He had 3 helicopters. He's got 1 left after he sells this one. So I guess we'll find out what else he's going to try and pawn off. He had a bad year last year, to be fair. I mean, like, he was having a rough time for the last several years at some of his properties because his base does not stay at his properties. They don't buy condos in his building because they're too expensive. So, all of this money that he lost through COVID because the hospitality industry just got completely destroyed last year. He's having a rough time. Yeah. And now he's got 11 billion lawsuits. So, ouch.
Exactly how much is 11 billion?
It's kind of like a nebulous thing, kind of like the color puce. You don't really know what it is. You just sort of throw it out there.
Or throw it up and out and down. Okay, yeah. I got it. I don't know where to go with that after that. So thanks for that one. But we find out this week after the testimony Tuesday of the Capitol Police and the Metro Police that we've got Mo Brooks wearing a bulletproof vest to the family reunion that Michelle Bachmann was at. Why is this a big deal?
So what was crazy to me is that he willingly admitted this with like a grin on his face. Like he was divulging something where he was like, hey, man, I got the inside scoop, if you know what I mean, right? And it was kind of like this thing where you're like, oh, you just revealed something that's going to get you in trouble. You're going to get subpoenaed for this information. Basically, he told the reporter that he was given a tip that it was going to be, a risky that it was going to be some risky stuff. There were going to be some hijinks, and that he should, do something to protect himself. So he wore some body armor. He said that's why he wore that big yellow coat, with big yellow windbreaker over it. And I just think like this is one of those things where, it's hard to say that this was a completely peaceful, fine tourist visit, family reunion, with people hugging and kissing whenever you feel the need to wear a bulletproof vest. But the question is, who told him that?
Steve Bannon.
When did they
obviously.
tell him? Yeah. Well, I wondered that. I wondered if it was Bannon or if he, was coordinating with some of the militia guys. That's a big question. Who was taking folks around the Capitol and giving them the tours and giving them, diagrams of what the Capitol looked like? Steve Bannon, ahead of the event, was basically sounding the alarm that this is going to be hell. This is going to be huge. The way that he described it, it was very, very clear that he knew exactly what was going to happen, and he knew it back in like December. So one of the other questions, though, is in Michael Bender's new book about the Trump administration. He has this weird section where Trump is in the big tent that they had, sort of the pre-tent, like their little green room outside of the stage for when they were going to go up to speak to the crowd in the ellipse. And you remember the video with Donald Trump Jr. that was filming, showing everybody what was in there, and right. Ivanka was in there and all of that stuff. At one point, Trump turns, and this isn't in the video, but at one point in the book, there's this amazing excerpt where Trump sort of asks his aides, do you think it's going to get violent? And Judd Deere, one of his comms guys, was like, no, of course not. Why would it get violent? Your people are never violent. Why? That makes no sense. Everybody's always really chill and fine, and they're cool and whatever. So and then Trump basically responded, I don't know, they're pretty fired up out there. And it was kind of this idea of Trump suspected that something was going to happen. And if Bannon knew, I mean, that's the thing. If Steve Bannon knew, he told Donald Trump. He might not work for the White House anymore, but I can guarantee you he and Trump still talk.
Yeah.
And I bet Bannon had told him what to expect. And if Trump knew, the piece of his speech, this is in one of the other books, I can't remember if it was Michael Wolff, I think it was the Wolff book or the Bender book. They talked about how that speech that he gave was all about, basically was all completely written by his staff, but that one line where he said, we're going to walk to the Capitol and I'm going to go with you, all of that was ad-libbed. His staff didn't write any of that. That was him. That was his choice to say that. So then you start thinking, okay, well, if he knew that this was going to get violent, if he knew that this was bad, and then he basically, himself decided to provoke it, to stoke the fires, then that's a pretty big responsibility. And I would hope that the Capitol Select Committee is going to try and figure that out.
Yeah, I hope so too. But do you buy the ham-handed kind of coup attempt that they were going to cause this chaos? The Secret Service was going to take Mike Pence and they're going to put him in a secret location somewhere and then just hold him there so that they couldn't certify the election. Do you buy that?
Well, I think what they tried to do, and this is to Pence's credit, is the story is that they took him down to the basement because he wanted to stay on the floor. He wanted to stay as close to the floor as possible. And finally, they got so close. I think it was like 40 paces from the door. The Secret Service was like, we got to go. And that's when they rushed him down the steps in that video. They're underground in an entrance that is seriously secure that only, the president and the speaker and those folks can use. And his Secret Service were like, you need to get in the car. And he was like, hell no. If you put me in the car, you're driving me off. And I think that was what they intended to do. Is they wanted to put him in the car, drive him to Andrews, and stick him on a plane. And at that point, they can't certify the election. And Pence was like, no, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and this is where I come back to. I get all of that, and you've got the theory has me into that point. But there's tomorrow. You clear all that out, you bring him back, and you do it tomorrow. Whoever devised this plan didn't think about do it tomorrow.
No,
Did they plan on holding Pence indefinitely?
I don't know. I also wondered at what extent did were they trying to create so much violence that Trump could declare martial law? Because if he could do that, then he stays in power. He could sort of try this indefinite, rule thing. I don't know that it necessarily would have worked. I think, that would have ended up in the Supreme Court really quickly, and the Supreme Court would have been like, yeah, no, bye-bye.
Even his Supreme Court, I think, would have said, yeah, no. No, I'm
yeah,
right with you.
Which is funny. A lot of his books, the books that I've been reading, they talk about how much Kavanaugh really hates him.
Good. That's the best. Good. That's the only answer I got. Good. But I hope we get to the bottom of it. There's part of me goes, I hope someone was dumb enough to come up with this half-hearted, half-hammed kind of idea that, hey, this is how we could do it, because it's so stupid.
Well, here's my theory. All of the militia people, all of those top guys that were planning all of this ahead of time, the people who were getting the tours, they are going to need to do something to deal. They're going to have to give something up to get a lesser sentence. And the only thing that they're going to have is being able to rat on the congressman.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping that happens. And if it does, you'll be here to keep us informed and up to date. Sarah, as always, I appreciate the time. Great stuff. Keep up the great work there at Raw Story. I hope folks check out the work you do. As always, great stuff. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks. Have a good weekend.
You as well. Our good friend Sarah Burris. Again, make sure you check out her work over at rawstory.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Biden welcomes the agreement as one that would show the United States can do big things.
$1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill inches forward in divided Senate.
Dead fish everywhere.
Florida Gulf Coast hit with massive red tide. Plus,
we must do better.
Oregon moves ahead with historic clean energy legislation.
All of that history in the making and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
The Department of Energy has a sensor array computer analysis capability that can detect in real time the lightning strikes that might set off a blaze.
We have lightning sensor rays? That's awesome. Do we by any chance have anything that can stop climate change? Because I switched to paper straws a year ago and I don't think they're working.
This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, big news I know for you when it comes to infrastructure, which you've been talking about for many, many years. Maybe it'll now actually happen.
Maybe.
Maybe.
A bipartisan infrastructure deal passed a key procedural hurdle to begin debate in the U.S. Senate. The nearly $1 trillion plan includes $550 billion in new spending over 10 years to improve the nation's aging infrastructure, including significant spending to repair water systems, modernize the electric grid, and build out the first ever national electric vehicle charging network. If the bill ultimately passes, and that is a very big if, it would be one of the most significant long-term investments in nearly a century. On the Senate floor on Wednesday, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer vowed to pass both this bill and President Biden's much broader $3.5 trillion budget reconciliation package.
Yeah, the one with all the climate change stuff in it.
I have laid out a two-track strategy on infrastructure, a bipartisan bill focused on traditional brick-and-mortar infrastructure projects, and a budget reconciliation bill where Democrats plan to make historic investments in American jobs, American families, and efforts to fight climate change.
Politico reports that former President Donald Trump is trying to sabotage the bipartisan deal because Republicans never gave him an infrastructure package.
Because he never actually tried.
Meanwhile, 17 states are under some kind of heat watch or warning, with 30 million Americans likely to see triple-digit temperatures due to the fifth heat dome in just 6 weeks to stall over the country. Some towns in Montana and Wyoming have seen more days above 100 degrees Fahrenheit so far this year than Dallas, Texas. A new study from Climate Central confirms that since 1970, more than 90% of U.S. cities have seen a big increase in the number of days above 77 degrees Fahrenheit. The researchers remind dog owners that temperatures above 77 degrees also mean pavement surfaces in direct sunlight can get as hot as 125 degrees, creating painful and even dangerous conditions for dogs' paws. They also warn that dogs can experience heat-related illnesses just like people. The observed increase in extreme weather events like heat waves is also reducing the reliability of nuclear power plants. A comprehensive new global analysis of the world's nuclear fleet calculates that extreme weather outages at nuclear plants are occurring nearly 8 times more frequently now than in the 1990s, due in part to heat and drought that limit the availability of cold enough water to cool the reactors.
Yeah, the heat warms the rivers, the lakes, whatever they're using, and that water is not cool enough to keep the nuclear power plant cool.
Kind of a problem.
Yeah.
The study also found that hurricanes and typhoons are now a leading cause of nuclear plant outages.
That's chilling.
Florida is grappling with a massive toxic algae bloom that has littered Tampa Bay and about 100 miles of the state's Gulf Coast with dead fish and other marine animals. Red tides naturally occur off the coast of Florida, but scientists say they're now getting bigger, more frequent, and much worse because of pollution and warming ocean temperatures due to man-made climate change.
And don't they normally come later in the year than this one is coming now?
Yes, they do. Finally, some good news. Oregon's Democratic Governor Kate Brown signed into law one of the nation's most ambitious renewable energy plans. Among a number of strong provisions, it tightens the timetable for the state's 2 major power companies to reach emissions-free electricity and bans the construction and expansion of fossil fuel power plants. It also allocates $50 million in grants for community-based clean energy projects. Governor Kate Brown emphasized environmental justice in a signing ceremony on Tuesday.
The impacts of climate change are not felt equally. In every crisis and every natural disaster, those who already face disparities due to discrimination and racism are hit the hardest. We must do better.
Good. Glad to see action happening at the state level while D.C. dithers. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Today, the group Citizens Against Government Waste came out with a report. Not so much of a report, just as a story saying that there's support building, returning to Congress for earmarks. Now, I've said from the beginning, getting rid of earmarks was a bad idea. Should have reformed how it was done, maybe a little bit more oversight, a little more transparency. But the idea that representatives go to Washington and go, hey, we need water systems, we need highways, we need, libraries, museums, hospitals, whatever. We need money to help build our infrastructure, take care of our citizens. Bringing something back to the district is a good thing. It's how we build things, how we create jobs, good stuff. They don't seem so thrilled, but they pointed out it's almost going to be bipartisan because a lot of people are asking for it, and also have gone after and attacked Bob Ney, our next guest, on him abusing earmarks along with Randy Duke Cunningham, and here to share some thoughts on the return of earmarks and the possibility that, well, did he in fact abuse the earmarks? I've asked our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney to come back. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you, Rick.
So I was surprised to see you named in this, and again, tied to Jack Abramoff. Did you ever do any earmarks for Abramoff?
No, I am the only person in U.S. history where Abramoff asked me to consider an amendment to a bill, not an earmark, an amendment to a bill. I told him I would take a look at it. I'd have to see. I didn't want the bill ruined. Never laid it on the table, never laid a draft down. That was all verified, and they went after me for that. And that was not an earmark. That was in a piece of legislation. He wanted some language we never did. I read these, and I just love how they, and it's, honestly, this is way up above me, but how they were just put in there. Well, Randy Duke Cunningham, he did some earmarks, that's true. He got the watches or cars or whatever he got. But they just like to throw things out there. Well, Jack Abramoff Bob Ney did the earmarks for him. Well, no, I didn't. And as far as the whole issue itself, there was more bipartisan activity when we had earmarks, number one, than when we didn't. Number two, do you want, as a citizen in, wherever, Pennsylvania, Ohio, any state, any little burb, do you want some unelected person that doesn't even know where the city is or anything about it sitting in D.C. saying, well, I think I'll give Carlisle, Pennsylvania that needed appropriation? You want your legislators who go back home and talk to your citizens and council people and township trustees and mayors, et cetera, and governors, you want them to be able to do it. Yep. Now, I am 100% in favor of put your name to it. Here's who did the earmark. They did it. Their name's on it. And then if there's any, bad things that happen, you've got their name on it.
Absolutely. No, it's one of those things where, I've been saying for the longest time, if you're not, getting something out of it to bring back to your community, the obvious answer is no, we're not going to do anything. And it would make this infrastructure bill so much easier to get through if everyone said, hey, look, we've got things we need. Let's put this in there. Let's divvy up the funds. Let's make sure things get done. Because, hey, that's how we move forward as a country. That's how we've invested in all the things we've done over the years.
And this is, Citizens Against Government Waste, and so they'll pick out these things, of requests again that are vetted. Most of these are vetted. They're vetted through local officials, citizens, development districts, et cetera. So they always bring these up, and fine. If there's been some bad things done in relationship to earmarks, fine. Punish the people that did it. Put people's names on it for from here on out, and then we know exactly who did what and why they did it. I see no problem with it. I think it will help the citizens, and I do think it helps the system. All I know is when we had them, we got along a lot better. The R's and the D's.
I absolutely agree. It's like that whole how do you herd cats? Right. you gotta have the pile of food there. This is how you herd politicians. Give them the things that they need to go home, have their ribbon cutting ceremonies, get the pats on the back. Look what I brought home. All that stuff. I'm not against it.
All right.
Let's move on. Congress has passed a $2.1 billion capital security bill. I guess the Senate passed it. It's going to Biden. Is this needed? I mean, do we need more funding for capital security, or should we have used what we had better?
Well, I think it's that's a great question, actually. I think it's a combination of both. No amount of money in the world would have, corrected why the Fed was asked late, or why they came in late, or why no one listened to the chief of police in the sense of the Capitol Police Board or the Sergeant of Arms. Nothing would have changed that. So the system needs changed of how it responds. Now, as far as needing money, I do think they'll need new security money. But again, unless they dig deep on this committee that's going on, the January 6th Commission, unless they dig deep, then all the money in the world is not going to prevent what happened. And unless we beef up our security to find out about these radical groups, unless we do that, again, then we're not going to be prepared for some type of activity in horrible situations like we had on 6th.
Now, the Twitters were going all lighting up over the fact that AOC and the squad voted against this, as I understand. I guess their concerns were there weren't any police reforms in this. Am I getting that right?
Yes, they wanted some police reforms in it. Now, I guess you'd have to look at the situation of, were they talking about police reforms on Capitol Hill? And they're not. They're talking, generically about police reforms, which I think one could argue, they have a point, they have an issue, and they have a voice. I think one could argue, overall reform, what's going to happen with the police and how that's handled would be in a police reform bill. I'm not sure you drove that into a bill that's designed for the security of the Capitol, because the issue has not been, in general, the Capitol Hill police being overly aggressive with, citizens.
Right.
The citizens in this case were overly aggressive with the Capitol Hill police.
Right. Now this was an overwhelmingly passed bill, 98-0 in the Senate, 416 in the House, 416 to 11 in the House. Now this, as I'm looking at this, immediately my mind goes to the Republicans who have been basically attacking the 4 police officers who testified on Tuesday. This is them reclaiming, hey, we care about the Capitol Police. And now that you have AOC and the squad voting against it, basically putting themselves in the line of fire to now give the Republicans the opportunity to go back and reclaim their "we love the police" mantra.
Well, it'll give them a bit of a chance because of the high-profile name of AOC to go after her, but they can't go after the Democratic Party because overwhelmingly the Democratic Party said, well, wait a minute, we're still going to do this bill.
Right.
We're not going to stop this bill as a result of the issue with AOC. They'll take that up in another bill. So the Democratic Party can't be attacked. Now, you're right, the Republicans will say we're standing up for law and order. They're actually standing up for their own protection. That's what they're doing. And I don't know, and this goes back to the conversation we had yesterday, I don't know how anybody who serves there in their right mind or conscience can look at what happened on the 6th and not say that, this was a terrorist attack and they tried to kill the very officers that try to make sure all of the members of staff get home every night safe. I don't know how with good conscience they can't think about that. So if they want to stand up and say, yeah, we support them, well, the way to support the Capitol Hill police is not to say the terrorists were tourists.
Or as Michelle Bachmann said, it was just a family reunion.
Right. Oh, right. Oh, I didn't hear that. I didn't know that.
I had wondered which hole she had crawled into, but she brought her crazy self out. It was a big prayer day. Everyone was praying, and this was kind of the argument being this was God's will.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you served with her, right?
No, I missed her.
Oh, did you? You were lucky enough to miss that?
I missed her. Yes.
Yeah, because
I served with some other entertaining people, Steve King.
No, she was Fruit Loops, and. I never really thought in a dangerous kind of way, and I'm not denigrating people with mental illness, because I think she's just plain nuts, not mentally ill, just nuts. But I never put her in the dangerous category like you see a lot of the Greens and the Gomerts and the Gosserts and the Gates. And speaking of the 4Gs, did you see the stunt they pulled today, trying to go to a jail and demanding to get in?
No. For what reason?
They wanted to investigate because evidently, according to Louis Gogo Gomert, that the martyrs who are being held are being treated worse than, quote, the bloodthirsty terrorists in Guantanamo Bay, and he demands access to the prison because he has super secret special clearance, and they should let him in.
Wow. I did not. And who are these people he wants to see?
He wants to see the people that were arrested because of January 6th. The martyrs.
When are the Republicans, the ones doing this, when are they going to learn to stop? I mean, really, that's bizarre.
No, they're playing for the base.
I did serve with him, so.
Was he as crazy then as he is now?
Well, he built upon it like anything. A fine wine ages, and gets finer. He got crazier. Yeah, he started out unbalanced, but to do what he's done today is that's ridiculous.
No, I mean, the four of them, they had a whole stunt. They brought cameras. They were outraged. They're trying to raise money off of it because they wanted to go in and inspect the jails. Now, you were a member of Congress for years. Did you ever think you had the right just to walk into any federal building, any federal detention center or anything unannounced and just show up and go, let me in?
I mean, you could do it if you were going to, an agency like HUD or something like that, a building, but absolutely you can't do it for security purposes. And by the way, as you know, I was on the other side of those bars, so you just can't, walk in. In fact, one former member of Congress tried to come see me, and it caused I thought I was going to be beaten with a baton by the guards, but you just can't do it. There are security factors. It would be unconscionable. I would walk up to a detention center and say, I want in.
Yeah, it's crazy, but this is what these people are doing. But even worse. I mean, even worse than this, we had the March for the Taste of Freedom. Did you see the big demonstration they had, where about 50 of them walked from the House side to the Senate side in protest of having to wear a mask?
Right. Yeah, and of course, when I was there too, I got tired of those events where you're walking to the other chamber and you're trying to make an issue. It's like, okay, that's enough. Yeah, those get very tiresome.
But I guess you didn't have selfie sticks back then.
No, we didn't. We barely got we had BlackBerries when 911 occurred, and there was only 200 of them. Now we had 6,000 of them within 2 months after that, but there was only 200. Yeah, we didn't have selfie sticks.
Yeah, so I mean, this was an interesting stunt. But I got to be honest with you. If I'm a member of Congress, I'm not following 4G and the Gohmert Gates and Green and the other Gosar and Lauren Boebert. I'm not following that clan of crazy. I mean, I may do something, but not behind their banner.
Well, if I'm Republican and I'm going to argue that Donald Trump had nothing to do with them storming the Capitol, okay, if that's going to be my argument, I still need to argue that the people that stormed the Capitol were not good. They were not good people. I mean, if you're going to try to defend Trump, why would you turn around and say, but they were tourists. They were taking pictures. Why would you want to mix those two issues?
Yeah,
I don't get it.
I don't get it at all. It's a very strange day. And the mask thing is crazy. And I like what Tim Ryan, the congressman from Ohio and the candidate for Senate in Ohio. And I got to tell you, I hope your state of Ohio comes to its senses and votes for this guy, because I like him a lot. But, he came out and he said, look, I hate wearing this damn mask. And I do too. Hate wearing it. Hate it. But you do it out of respect for others. You do it to protect others and yourself too a little bit. But as a sign of respect for others, I think that's a big part of this. And I guess the Republicans have shown they don't care about anybody but themselves. And even then, they don't care about themselves.
I really hate this has become a blue state, red state deal. I mean, I know Republicans that wear masks, but in general, it's like, if you wear the mask, then you're pro-Biden. I don't understand. This is an individual thing for the good of the whole that you wear these. I mean, I think that the CDC made a horrible mistake in saying, well, let's do the volunteer plan, the honesty plan. If you've been vaccinated, all of a sudden every mask went off. I think we just needed to give it more time, and then vaccinations, and we would be in better shape today.
Yeah. No, but here again, you look at this, what's going on in the House, where the House doctor, I guess there's a doctor for Congress. They've said, look, in the House, you guys got to start wearing these masks on the floor. Because so many Republicans are not vaccinated. And as the story that I understand, and maybe you know more than I do, on the Senate side, the people who are probably more at risk and closer to getting sick and dying than those in the House, they've all been vaccinated. So it's a different environment.
It is, and it's like this defiance thing in the House. And here's another thing too. Why do you? Let's look at this politically for a second. If we don't want to look at concern and courtesy for people, Rick, let's look at it politically. Why would you want to be a member of Congress who are out, around their constituents, and you're going to be accused of of giving COVID to your constituents. That's really not a good campaign ad. Congressman so-and-so gave COVID to grandma. I really don't think that's a good campaign ad.
Yeah. Yeah, vote for me. I'm a super spreader.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, but here's the weird thing. I can see the Boeberts and the Gates and the Greens and all of them going, yeah, that's what we want. I can see that. It's crazy times we live in.
That's terrible.
But Bob, as always, I appreciate the time, the insight. Always good stuff.
Thank you, Rick.
Our good friend Bob Ney. And seriously, I mean, I look at this and it's really just kind of craziness. The fact that you have these folks who, and I know it sounds like we're beating a dead horse over here, but at the end of the day, wow, the level of entitlement, the level of selfishness. And look, I hate wearing those masks as much as anybody. Always have. From the beginning, always hated it. But there's a level of, and I guess, maybe it was my mother taught me right. Maybe I was raised right. Maybe, I don't know. I'm still the guy who opens doors for people. Maybe we're not that society anymore. I don't know. But wow. You got to wonder on a certain level. These, as I started off today talking about, these are the people that have been elected to lead us. These are the people who are supposed to solve the problems of our day. These are the people who we empower to do our work, and yet all they seem hell-bent on is scoring cheap political points and making things worse. This is where I go, I reach across the aisle and say, hey, take your party back to some bit of sanity. Come on over to the sane side a little bit. Not all the way. You don't have to come all the way. Just a little bit. I mean, does anybody seriously think that Gates and Green and Gohmert and Gosser should have gotten into a prison? Just waltzed right in? Do you think that should have been able to happen unannounced? Do you really think that's no, that's not how the real world works. And they knew it. It was a political stunt to enrage their base and raise money. This is all a big ripoff. Now, do I believe their hatred of wearing masks is real? Yeah. Do I think they care about you or anybody else? No. This is the party of hooray for me and the heck with everybody else. The one who dies with the most toys wins. That's that party. Greed is good. This is them. And this is what this is manifested into. This kind of extreme childishness. Does it get any better? I don't know. Hope so. I keep hoping the GOP finds sanity, but every time I turn around, there's another story of another one of them doing something crazy. Is that our news media only picking out the insanity because it sells? Some. I guarantee there's some of that. But there's so much of it. How can you not? There's so much crazy out there. And again, like I said a moment ago, I'm not putting down people with true mental illness. These people don't have mental illness. They're just nuts. Sadly, Arkansas, the Children's Hospital there has reported a record number of children in the state with COVID-19. They are saying that the hospitalization rate is way up. They're concerned that their hospitals are filled. The children's hospitals are at peak, they say. The real surge is that they had not seen previously. So, again, what the GOP, the WWGOP wants you to believe is, it's not that bad. And look, it's not going to kill everybody. And earlier, Pete Dominick was right. It doesn't have a fatality rate high enough to turn Florida or Texas blue. But maybe we get rid of some of them. I'm at that point. because I'm walking around a store today. I've got this damn mask on and I'm not happy about it because we could be through this already. We could have been done with this by now. We have the vaccine. It's what we did all last year to get to this point, to have something where we could protect ourselves. And yet you got these people running around going, no, don't do that. Vaccine's going to kill you. Very bizarre, friends. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the programs on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Power when we stand and fight together. There is power when we organize.
It's time for The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. What a fun day today was in GOP fantasy land. Wow, there was the March for the Taste of Freedom. That's right. Lauren Boebert, the green woman from Georgia, Gates, a whole bunch of GOP faithful angry that the congressional doctor said, hey, in the House, you should wear a mask. You should do that since a good number of you are too stupid to get vaccinated. For the good of everybody, we're gonna reimpose a mask mandate. Now the little children, staked out their protest, got their little selfie sticks. They were all marching over to the Senate, where on the Senate side, they don't have to wear masks. Now, as I have understood this, and here's the difference. The Senate, a bunch of old white guys, the victims of the pandemic generally, the people who are most at risk, the people who have been vaccinated already. In fact, most of them were vaccinated before any of us could get vaccinated. So in looking at this, if you were a sane, rational person going, this workplace, everybody's vaccinated. They're going to be okay. This workplace, you've got a bunch of dimwits running around wanting to infect everybody else.